I personally love War Sales. Bannerlord's new DLC adds in a ton of new features, from the new Nord faction, new training mechanics, resources, and not to mention naval battles that feel incredibly cinematic. Features that, if you told me would be in the game 3 years ago, I would have laughed so hard that King Harless would have cucked me again. But I'm not stupid, at least that's what my mum says. I did not pay for this DLC. Of course, it's no secret that outlets and YouTubers are given keys by developers to try out new features or new games, and of course it's kind of a win-win deal. They get free advertising, and we get to try out a game a little bit earlier. But there are some issues that come with that. It automatically gives the YouTuber a completely different perspective on new features and whether the game feels worth it. This is something that no longer really applies because, well, they didn't spend their hard-earned cash on it. And then we get the flip side. You see, the Steam page for War Sales is not looking all that positive. So I've spent the last few days collecting comments and thoughts from you guys, the community, people that have a widely more realistic expectation of what they want from this DLC and Bannerlord in general. And, well, I've put in my own thoughts because this is my channel after all. There are many reasons why I think War Sales has some issues and why it's got a long way to go before it's the DLC that makes you truly feel like a Bannerlord. Lord. First of all, let's talk about the technical problems. Mount & Blade has never been estranged to technical issues, from crashing and freezing to trying to work with third-party mods. Of course, that's not entirely Tailward's fault, but it would be nice to be able to play mods without crashing every 3 seconds. The compatibility between modifications, always a huge issue. I mean, even the base game for me still crashes time and time again. Then every time there's a new update that comes out, all the mods stop working, everything breaks, and the game itself splutters to a halt. And of course, having a new expansion and new DLC just iterates that time and time again. I mean, going through a load of the comments on my videos, people saying the game keeps crashing on me, things like smelting too much or crafting something in the smithing, it crashes every time you leave. That never happened before, because of course this War Sales expansion is tagged onto the main base game. You can't exactly buy War Sales and then not just play it with Mount & Blade. Somebody said in my comments, don't buy this, it destroys my old game and new DLC doesn't work. Someone says, need help, the frame rate has gone to trash, I'm getting crashes now. And then another comment saying, Bannerlord's community so starved for content they actually look at this pile of shit and get excited. Now, of course, there's a lot of varied and interesting comments there, but I second quite a bit of this. You see, War Sales itself seems polished on the outside. In fact, the ship battles and, I did a battle where I was just in this river and it was sunset, and I was playing as the Nords with their sky god-chosen archers. They looked absolutely gorgeous, and it is incredibly cinematic at times. When you're cascading and crashing into other ships, I absolutely adore it. But, yeah, your men will bug through ships. Lighting issues are still quite a big problem with this new update. 1.3 brought in cool new lighting stuff, but there's just flashing on the screen constantly. A lot of the cloth physics get broken. I mean, I played a whole battle where it almost gave me an epileptic fit, and as far as I'm aware, I didn't have epilepsy until this DLC came out, so that's new. Why is my cloak? Cloak, what are you... Cloak! Then, of course, there's actually trying to install the DLC. A lot of people getting stuck and not actually going into there. For me, personally, when I'm trying to sail on a ship, we crash into an enemy ship, we board onto them, and men will fight. They won't necessarily charge onto the other ship, but they will try. They'll fall into the water. They'll try and swim away. Their ship will go down. They'll just swim after you constantly, trying to get back on board a friendly ship. And then when you're done with that boarding action, you want to get on your ship and go to a different fight. Sometimes they just will not detach ships. They'll just sit there and wait, and nothing will happen. Not just that, but when you delegate command to AI, they will just pivot on a hard left or a hard right turn, and sometimes they will just crash into their friendly ships. The wind is obviously less when we get... Oh my god. The wind is obviously less when we're up against, well, mountains and things like that. But you can see how fast and swiftly the longships can actually move through this area. And my guess is that the heavy Empire lads are going to be... Guys, what are we doing? These are some incredibly common complaints that keep popping up. And of course, this DLC has just come out. And really, we've had some sort of updates on this, as we'll get into later. There have been a day one patch, but I will really go in depth exactly what's changed, because it's to be expected. A new update and a new huge expansion, there's always going to be huge issues. They're trying out something that they've never done before, so I don't exactly blame it on them. However, these are things that still should be brought up, which is why it brings us on to AI in general. Now, AI in Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord, is it the best in the world? No. I think you can probably put it on par with something like Total War. Now, Total War is a completely different game, but the AI seems to act very, very similar. Sometimes they like listening, sometimes they don't. Archers will shoot at the, well, enemy that you've told them specifically not to shoot at. They've only just fixed ladders, they've only just fixed siege towers. It's been 5 years, and we've had half a decade of people not climbing up the ladders you tell them to. So how did it work when they brought it onto Navy battles? Well, I've mentioned them not detaching ships. I've mentioned AI boats crashing into each other. They're not being able to swim to shore. They will just follow around your other ship if their ship goes down. Community have said that the Nords don't seem to form armies on the world map. They actually just walk around with some small bandit parties. And this is a problem that we'll get onto a little bit. The Nord faction in general has many, many issues. But the fact that the AI doesn't form these huge armies that a lot of the other factions mean kind of indicates that they'll never get anywhere. It is very much a starting faction. They are not here to cause much trouble in Calradia like the trailers and the lore that was brought out before this DLC had us think. They'll be at war with pretty much everyone and still refuse to accept peace with anyone. So diplomacy kind of out the window with these guys. And then it comes to the actual battles, the ship battles themselves. I have found it so hard to have a proper good ship battle that feels like something akin to a realistic bit of naval warfare. Most of the time, the ships will just crash into each other and then it'll become a land battle. Very rarely is there like a unique skirmish between ships, where ships sort of stand at the side, skirmish with each other. Boarding shouldn't just be a given. Boarding should be a last resort, really. These battles should be crashing into each other, maybe firing skirmish ballistas, trying to set fire to sails, and then if you want to, you can board onto the enemy ships. But it seems like the AI have been coded to aim straight ahead, aim straight for the enemy ship, crash into the side of them, hop on, and then like I mentioned, we are now back at square one, where the naval battles are pretty much just regular land battles, just in a different setting on boats. There's about 10 seconds of having real boat warfare, where there's a bit of tactics and skirmishing, firing arrows, throwing javelins, using fire pots to try and burn people, but after that, we're back to fighting hand to hand, and I think that's something that could really be tweaked to really improve the way that this, well, DLC works. And then it brings us on to the newest addition to the game, the newest faction that bring a lot with them, and this is the Nords. Now, I was very excited when we'd be getting a new faction, sort of our poster child for what the Nords in Warband would be, because remember, Bannerlord is set 200 years before the events of Mount & Blade Warband, and we have the Nords there, and now we've got the Nords here. They came across the oceans, they're raiding parties, they're kind of giving a use to the Sea Raider faction, minor faction, and then, well, they actually came about. Now, this whole new faction that should be a standalone entity that have these huge long ships that are kind of bringing naval battle into the fray are pretty weak, there's not very good scaling, and they're kind of useless beyond the 10-hour mark. Their troops are pretty useless. They're sort of tier 1 and tier 2 troops, and they're outclassed by looters quite a lot of the time. With pretty much every other faction, especially the royal troops, they can take on looters pretty handily. A lot of people have said in my comments they suck, they made a melee-based faction and they made them bad at melee. This is actually quite the case. The infantry, everybody is telling to buff the infantry. Even the best berserkers can get taken down by legionaries, and you're having like tier 5 versus tier 5 troops, and the Nords will lose pretty much every time. The Nords kind of feel a little bit like a bandit faction, more than anything, but they just have the diplomacy and the lords and the minor factions, well, much like everybody else. And then it comes to their equipment. The heavy armored troops don't feel heavy. They don't feel like they can form a line and go up against some, well, even the Sturgeons. The Sturgeons are much better at that sort of thing, even though they're sort of inspired by each other. The head armor very weak. Makes them very susceptible to getting shot in the head, as I found out. And when it comes to the mariners, as in the people that actually fight at sea, they don't really do too much. I mean, you have the seaborne archers. They're sort of a tier 2 troop. They're not exactly that powerful, even on the ocean. And, I mean, you can go up the line of the Nords. I did a full video testing out their Sky God chosen archers. This is supposed to be the best of the best archery line for the Nords. They have full chainmail helmets. They've got axes. They even have shields as archers. That's awesome. They should be really good in melee, but they're not. They can get taken down by tier 3 battalion troops. They get taken down by pretty much anybody. These are supposed to be the high tier archers of this Nord faction, and they don't have cavalry, so all you're relying on is infantry and archers, but neither the highest tier of the Nord infantry or the highest tier of the Nord archers are any good. I also thought maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe they'll be better at sea. Maybe this is what they're for, because all of the Nord troops have a little wave icon under their tier, and this means that they are infantry that work good as marine troops, so they'll be fighting better at sea. But they don't seem to be able to do that. It basically means when you crash into the enemy ships, everybody's now fighting this land battle where troops get their regular stats, and since the Nords aren't given very good stats on land, well, they're not very good at it. I mean, Battalion Fian will wipe the floor, even in the middle of the ocean, with the Nord's archers. It's not even close. I mean, just watch this. Okay, they are getting the advantage here, so let's get some oars out here, and let's try and get up and close and try and fight these guys in melee. Of course, our guys are shit. The Fian are demolishing us. Come on. Now they're killing me. They're shooting me. They've gone for the steerer. Oh, God. Into the side. Oh, it's like ramming a broadside. Oh, God. Oh, God. We're okay. We are okay. We can take control of the character. The Fian have slaughtered. They've slaughtered us. Not just this, but you can't do custom battles on land with the Nords. If you go into the custom battle screen, you can do naval custom battles, but if you switch it to the regular land custom battles, the Nord faction disappears, as if they're not meant to be a land faction at all. That's so confusing. It feels like there's a faction that feels a little bit underbuilt, undertuned, unfinished. I mean, they're great for early game. It adds in a cool new mechanic of being able to sail the seas, and sure, they're good against sea raiders and a lot of looters most of the time. But once you get past the early game, they get swamped by every other faction on the map. And all these other factions aren't really doing naval warfare the way that would need it to be for the Nords to actually be a powerhouse. It's not like they're these huge, big Huskars, huge infantry that can make it across the oceans at some point in the game, then get onto land and then start raiding and causing havoc against the Vlandians or the Khuzaits. No, that's not how this game works. They are just another faction that are incredibly underpowered. I think the way to fix this would be to do just the opposite of that. Have the Nords be very strong like they are in the early game, but they can't have ships yet. They are just building up against minor factions, bandits and looters, and maybe invasions come every now and then. You've got to survive and grow up your armies, and then when you can get armies and start to get ships, then the naval invasions happen, and you can go across the water and start causing havoc, and they can actually be a threat to these Western armies, but that just doesn't seem to be the case. Now, let's talk a little bit about missing features that people are complaining about. A lot of people have said there's no naval invasions into cities. That is a bit of a missed opportunity. You can blockade cities, but when you actually attack a blockade, you just end up doing a naval battle. Even when you click on the custom battles to do a naval battle at the coast of some sort of city, the city is so far in the background, it's sort of in the mist, you can hardly see it. You're basically just doing a normal out in the ocean naval battle. As I mentioned, there are no land custom battles with Nords. The late game content isn't there. Of course, there are some new skills you can get to, be better at fighting at sea, but a lot of the sea gameplay is still very, very early on. I think the reason is people have paid a decent amount of money for this, and they feel like there isn't enough content to make it feel like that. And if I'm going to be honest, I think it's a really cool new feature, but if I was paying more than $20 for this DLC, would I, be as positive to it as I actually feel in my own personal point of view? Perhaps not. I think I love this, but if this was in the base game, I'd be overwhelmed. I'd be thinking this is an incredible improvement upon Warband. But the fact that it's come 5 years later as a $20 DLC, I think that has wavered quite a lot of people. People being very frustrated that it doesn't feel like there's the value that they deserve. Things like bugs and crashing and, a few features that could be tweaked are kind of minor in the grand scheme of things, but it's the fact that there doesn't feel like there is an end game here. Enough to actually get their hands on to make $20 feel worth it that I think is scaring people away. There is some extra story stuff within the game, but it's basically just naval tutorials, really. And then it brings us on to mod compatibility. This DLC and expansion broke pretty much every mod within Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord. And of course, the modders are now having to fix everything, meaning that the base game is going to be undercooked for the next few months while things are being fixed. Is that a huge surprise? No, definitely not, but it is just another thing where every time there's a new update, issues seem to follow. I've mentioned what the community thinks, and we've seen the Steam pages. People are kind of confused at why this DLC took so long or why it cost so much, and that's why it's got mixed reviews, but I wanted to just give my own 2 cents on what I think about it. I really like the naval battles. I think there are an awesome amount of detail within them. I think the way ships sail on the ocean is absolutely beautiful. I think boarding is something that we have only been able to dream of in Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord. Of course, we got Viking Conquest back in the day, but it was nowhere near as detailed and as cool as this, and I adore it. Now, the late game is shallow. Would I play the Nords if I was trying to conquer Caradia? Never. They just can't do it. But would I play them if I wanted to mess around with ships in the early game? A little bit, maybe. But actually, I think the best addition this DLC brings is naval battles and ships to the rest of the factions. Because the Nords, sure, they have long ships, but they're not actually very good as ships in the ocean. You have like the Empire, huge heavy warships like the Trireme Star with ballistas and firepots on them. That is where this DLC shines. All the other factions getting these huge ships and being able to fight in naval warfare, I think they're really, really pushing a lot of the content and the quality for this DLC. I think the actual Nord new faction is kind of a minor point. It shouldn't be, but that's the way it's just come out to be. I think adding naval warfare for the rest of the factions is where I really see the value here. But of course, that brings us on to what the thing is going on to now. We've just had a big day 1 patch. Now, of course, the map has completely changed. The weather, it plays a big role at sea. There's storms, there's currents. They can speed you up or grind you down. They can also injure your ships as well. But then that brings us on to what they're changing with the day 1 patch. Of course, we've had more things like the fast mode built in, parlaying with enemy, reworked settlement projects and CGI. The base game has had a new overhaul at this point in time. The modding capabilities has changed. They've expanded modding support. We've added F-mod audio event support, which means that we can, have attacking sound animations that are custom made. You can pretty much have events that are triggered by F-mod and have complete custom music that is put in. So for example, you can go into a naval battle, you can make it play the Pirates of the Caribbean tune every time you go into it. I think that's absolutely awesome. Of course, I'd never be able to do that on YouTube because I'd be sued into oblivion. But there are some great things that have been added in. Yet, I do worry that if this is direction that Bannerlord is going with their DLCs, will they be able to keep the players on board? Because people have been waiting such a long time, and I think, well, waiting for another DLC that falls in this way might not last for all that long. It has been pretty successful for them. At the moment, we've got over 2,000 reviews on Steam. Normally, the rule is about 10% of people actually leave reviews. So a lot of people have bought this, and they probably made a good amount of money for it. And I think overall, it's a pretty decent DLC. It's not exactly the size that I think a lot of people feel like it's worth for the money, but I don't think it's a lost cause yet. Because whilst war sales might be lost at sea at this point in time, there is a lot of potential, not just from Tailwars, but for modders to utilize this to the best of their abilities. But please, let me know what you think. Do you think the DLC is actually worth it? Are you kind of stuck in the middle? I want to see your out of 10 review in the comments down below. But please subscribe because there'll be plenty of feedback and war sales stuff coming straight to your faces in the next few days. But until then, I will see you in the next one.